We're looking at the unification of Germany, which completely upset our balance of power in Europe that had been established at the Congress of Vienna. And this happened in a couple of phases, but was completed by 1871. So I just want to remind you of what the German Confederation looked like, that we have our two main states, Austria and Prussia, both of which are culturally German, but were oftentimes competitors with each other for influence over the other German states. There were revolts throughout the German Confederation in 1848, hoping for a liberal government led by the King of Prussia, and he refused that, as he called it, the crown from the gutter. The the Prussian king did attempt to establish a unified Germany, but it was blocked by Austria. There was this idea that if they wouldn't allow Germany to be united unless they also accepted Austrian influence in the German Confederation, and Prussia was not interested in becoming kind of secondary to Austrian needs, and so that unification effort failed. So that's really the end of the Großdeutsch plan, that idea of a large Germany with Prussia and Austria in it. But because of the Zollverein, that German customs union, we see the idea of a Germany being united without Austria as being much more practical, especially because there was that economic connection between Prussia and the other German states already, which is known as the Kleindeutsch plan. So when we see our steps to unification, here we have already by 1854, most of this region is part of this German customs unit, the Zollverein, other than Austria. And the movement toward German unification was really fostered by Otto von Bismarck, who is known for his idea of blood and iron. So instead of speeches and majority votes, he actually said iron and blood will answer the great questions of the day. And he was also a believer in something he called the gap theory, which meant that if a power was not explicitly given to a group of people, like, say, a Congress, then it by default went to the chancellor who was ruling for the king, in the king's name. So any kind of implied powers or unspecified powers went to the head of the government. So we're going to see a more authoritarian government develop in the North German Confederation. And then these other two things are just sort of funny sayings from Bismarck: never believe anything until it's been officially denied. And the less people know about how sausages and laws are made, the better they'll sleep at night. And if you don't believe me, you should go watch How It's Made about hot dogs. So Bismarck, in order to kind of inculcate nationalism in the North German Confederation, started a war with Austria over the territories of Schleswig and Holstein, which they had taken from Denmark in 1863, and then Prussia decided to take them both over. Austria actually started a war, that Austro-Prussian War or German Civil War or 7 Weeks' War, in order to regain those territories. And that Prussia's victory unified a lot of Germany without Austria in it. Prussia used railroads and to get troops from place to place. Breech-loading rifles were much more superior to Austria's military efforts. And so we ended up really with this North German Confederation established by Bismarck, with King William I was president. So he's king of Prussia still, but then president of the North German Confederation. Austria was given pretty generous terms on this. They have to give up Venice to Italy, but they didn't lose a significant amount of territory, and that was to keep kind of a low profile amongst the people who were still interested in the Congress system and the balance of power in Europe. So after this Austro-Prussian War, we have this North German Confederation, which you can see here on the map is this northern area that swings from over here in East Prussia through the northern part of Germany. And then this pink line is what is included in this North German Confederation. But this gray area right here, still culturally German, but not part of the North German Confederation. The way it works is that it does have a governing body and a representative group called the Reichstag, and it has two houses, the upper house and the lower house, but it was really run by Bismarck. We don't see a lot of power within this governing system. It's mostly in the hands of the chancellor. Bismarck, in order to get the southern German states interested in joining in with the North German Confederation, doesn't use blood and iron against them, but instead kind of taps into their feeling of nationalism with the Franco-Prussian War. It was started out by something called an Ems dispatch, which was a telegram which Bismarck bragged about insulting a French diplomat, and it basically Napoleon III was kind of goaded into war as an answer to this insult, this diplomatic insult that he felt happened with this telegram. And it was purposeful in order to incite German nationalism. We also see this as being a dramatically more destructive war for cities than earlier wars had been, because we have two fairly evenly matched industrial powers, but Prussia and the North German Confederation had focused in on a lot more of developing their military strength. And so it was a decisive victory for the Prussians. Here we have Napoleon III, who was captured in the Franco-Prussian War, sitting with Bismarck. Bismarck is the one with the tall boots and the pointy helmet. And Kaiser Wilhelm II was crowned Emperor of all the Germans in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles in 1871. And that's when the German Empire was also proclaimed. Those southern German states, I think your book describes it as they rushed to the North German Confederation to join in with this in nationalist spirit. And so this is how we get to that united Germany. We, of course, know that France lost Alsace and Lorraine in this, and that will have some repercussions in the future in a couple of modules from now. But if we go and look at what happens with Germany now that it is united, one of the things that we will see is this is an age of mass politics, where politicians are very interested in playing directly to working class people, in terms of making sure that they get the support of those working class people. Oftentimes these governments are very conservative and they manipulate nationalism and anti-Semitism and traditional values in order to distract from class conflicts that may emerge. Germany is actually our first country to do social welfare programs in order to gain the support of the working class. So here we see some of those descriptions of what we see in mass politics. Usually it's universal male suffrage. Germany is the first country to do the universal male suffrage consistently. France does with Napoleon III, and then they take it away. But to have that consistent suffrage is in Germany. Bismarck is known as this Iron Chancellor, and while there is a two-house legislature in the Reichstag, it is a multi-party system, and Bismarck did a lot to play different political parties off of each other to maintain his own influence. So he really saw two parties as his main threats, the Catholic Center Party and the Social Democratic Party. The Catholic Center Party tended to be very traditional. One of the ways that Bismarck deals with this threat is he wants to make sure people are loyal to Germany over being loyal to the Catholic Church. And so he started what he called the culture wars, kind of saying that Germany should be your main focus of loyalty. And this actually backfired on him. He lost a lot of popularity because of it and a lot of support amongst traditional conservatives, as well as kind of our non-industrial urban worker. And he promised that he was not going to go and say he was sorry. There's this phrase of going to Canossa, saying he won't bow to the Pope's will. And that's a historical reference to a Holy Roman Emperor, Henry IV, who made a mistake and was excommunicated and basically had to go on bended knee to ask the popes for forgiveness. And so going to Canossa means some sort of active penitence for wrongdoing. And Bismarck was saying he wouldn't back down, that he would not apologize, but he eventually did sort of let the Kulturkampf or struggle for civilization kind of fade away. He also wanted to look to isolate France. And he did that through a series of alliances with Italy, with Austria, with Russia, in order to keep France isolated and from having any kind of allies. And his other concern was the Democratic Socialist Party, and they were Marxists and they wanted pretty sweeping social changes. And so to undercut their popularity, he tried first of all outlying them. That was not successful, but he did a lot of social welfare programs without them, so they wouldn't get the popularity from encouraging these social welfare programs. Bismarck was just doing these on their own. So Germany gets our first social security laws, old age pensions that we see in Europe, not because Bismarck particularly loved socialism, but because he was willing to do those things in order to keep himself in power. We see this authoritarian government in Germany, and it's really honed in on developing industry. This is the time period, it's called the Second Industrial Revolution, where it's really focusing in on chemicals and transportation, electricity, using oil as the power source, and focusing in on steel. And Germany uses that to create this modern industrial military state. And they end up being one of the forerunners of industrialization behind Great Britain by the end of the 19th century. Okay. Some other things he does to minimize socialist threats. They already have required education, but he adds in protective tariffs, child labor is regulated, and improved working conditions. In 1890, Kaiser Wilhelm I had died and his son Wilhelm II took over. They disagreed on how much influence Wilhelm II should have, and Bismarck tried basically to play hardball and say, if you don't give me what I want, I will resign, and he was kind of forced to resign. This is a cartoon from Punch magazine in Britain called Dropping the Pilot, and we sort of wonder where this German ship will be headed once the main person who has been steering it for so many years leaves. One of the things that William II does is he does not renew some of those treaties that were made to isolate France. And so Russia and France end up becoming allies early in the 20th century. Another thing that Wilhelm II focused in on quite a bit was building up the Navy, which Great Britain saw as a threat. And we will see that play out in a couple modules from now.